No, sweetheart. Breathe. Please breathe. Ethan Cole's voice cracked as he shoved open the hospital door, a worn teddy bear slipping from his hand and thudding onto the tile. He'd come back early just to surprise his adopted daughter with the one thing that always calmed her. But the sound he heard first wasn't a greeting. It was the frantic, rising scream of a heart monitor. On the bed lay Nia, small and trembling, her lips turning a terrifying shade of gray. And standing over her was Ethan's wife, Clarissa, gripping the clear oxygen mask, pulling it away like it was something she wanted gone. Her face wasn't panicked. It was cold, decided. "You never should have been in this family," she hissed. Ethan moved on instinct, shoving Clarissa back and pressing the mask to Nia's face with shaking hands. "I've got you," he whispered, smoothing her curls as she dragged in a broken gasp. Nurses rushed in, then security. Clarissa's excuses spilling out too fast, too rehearsed. But one sentence betrayed her. She was going to ruin everything. Later, as the hallway fell quiet, Nia's whisper sliced Ethan open. "I tried to tell you. The way she looked at me. The things she said when you weren't there." Ethan swallowed the guilt like glass. He'd been busy. He'd trusted the wrong smile. And his child had paid the price in silence. That night, Ethan made one promise: no more blindness, no more delays. Whatever it cost, he would fight for the truth. And for the little girl, who had almost stopped breathing just to protect his feelings, Ethan sat alone in the narrow hospital hallway long after the doors had closed behind Clarissa, her heels fading into silence, like a lie finally exposed. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, harsh and unforgiving, as if the building itself refused to let him hide from the truth. He replayed the moment again and again, her hands on the mask, her eyes empty of fear for the child gasping beneath them. That wasn't panic, that was intent. The woman he had married had been a master of performances. Clarissa smiled for donors, toasted champagne. At galas, spoke softly about family values while cameras flashed. She had praised Ethan for adopting Nia, called him a hero in public. But behind closed doors, something darker had been growing. What Ethan saw in that hospital room wasn't sudden madness. It was the end of a long decision. When the nurse finally told him Nia was stable, relief washed over him, followed immediately by something colder. Anger. How long had Clarissa been carrying this resentment? How many dinners, car rides, and quiet nights had been poisoned by thoughts he never imagined she could have? The words she'd whispered echoed like a confession. "You never should have been in this family." The truth crept in with brutal clarity. Clarissa didn't see Nia as a child. She saw her as a threat, an obstacle, a reminder that Ethan's love had limits she couldn't control. Nia wasn't blood. She was adopted, disposable at least in Clarissa's mind. And somewhere along the way, contempt had hardened into something dangerous. Ethan pressed his palms into his eyes, the weight of betrayal settling into his chest. He hadn't just trusted Clarissa with his heart, he had trusted her with his daughter's life. And she had nearly taken it. Down the hall behind a closed door, Nia slept unaware of the storm her existence had stirred in someone who was supposed to protect her. Ethan stood slowly, his resolve sharpening into something unbreakable. Love had blinded him once. It never would again. Whatever Clarissa had planned, whatever she had justified, in the name of love or ambition, it ended here. Because Ethan finally understood the truth, this wasn't an accident. It was a choice. And now so was his. Nia woke just before dawn, her small fingers clutching the edge of the hospital blanket, like it was the only thing anchoring her to the world. Ethan was there instantly, rising from the chair beside her bed, his eyes red, his body stiff from a night without sleep. When she saw him, her lips trembled, not with relief, but with fear. "I'm sorry," she whispered, the words barely audible. Ethan froze. "Sorry for what, sweetheart?" he asked gently, though something in his chest was already breaking. Nia stared at her hands. "I should have told you sooner." Her voice shook. "The way she looked at me sometimes. The things she said when you weren't home." Tears slipped down her cheeks, silent, and practiced like she'd cried this way before quietly, so no one would notice. "She said if I talked, you'd be mad, that you'd send me away." The words hit Ethan harder than anything Clarissa had done. This wasn't just cruelty. It was calculated. "Why didn't you tell me?" he whispered, hating himself the moment the question left his mouth. Nia's shoulders curled inward. "Because I didn't want to hurt you," she said. "You looked happy. And I thought, if I was good enough, quiet enough, maybe it would stop." Her voice cracked. "I didn't want to lose you too." Ethan dropped to his knees beside the bed, taking her hands in his, holding them like they were something sacred. "Listen to me," he said, his voice breaking. "You didn't do anything wrong, not one thing. None of this is your fault." A sob tore out of her. "I almost died," she said softly, like she was stating a fact she still didn't understand. "Because I didn't want you to be sad." Ethan pressed his forehead to her hands, his shoulders shaking. In that moment, the truth became unbearable. His daughter had been protecting him even as she was being hurt in silence. And he hadn't listened. "I should have seen it," he whispered. "You tried to tell me." Nia squeezed his fingers weakly. "You're here now." And that was the moment Ethan understood love hadn't failed them. Silence had. Ethan didn't leave Nia's bedside after that. He sat there as the sun climbed higher, painting pale light across the hospital walls, and let the weight of her words settle into places he had avoided for far too long. Every memory replayed with a different meaning now. The nightmares she brushed off, the way her voice softened when Clarissa entered a room, the pauses before she answered simple questions. The signs had been there. He just hadn't wanted to see them. "I failed you," he said quietly, not as an apology, but as a confession. Saying it out loud felt like tearing something open inside his chest. "I trusted the wrong person. I was gone too much, and you paid for it." Nia shook her head weakly. "You didn't know." "But I should have," Ethan replied. His jaw tightened, tears burning his eyes. "Being busy isn't an excuse. Being in love isn't an excuse. I was supposed to protect you. That was my job." He took a slow breath, steadying himself. Guilt could crush him later. Right now she needed strength. He straightened, brushing his thumb gently over her knuckles. "This ends today," he said, his voice low but certain. "No more secrets. No more silence. No one ever gets between us again. Do you hear me?" Nia searched his face like she was trying to decide whether it was safe to believe him. Finally, she nodded. Ethan leaned closer. "I don't care what it costs me, money, reputation, comfort, any of it. I will fight anyone who tries to hurt you. I will listen every time you speak. And if you ever feel scared again, you tell me, even if your voice shakes. Especially then." Her grip on his hand tightened. "You won't send me away." "Never," he said without hesitation. "You are my daughter. Not because of papers, not because of blood. Because I chose you, and I'll keep choosing you every single day." For the first time since she woke up, Nia's breathing eased. And in that quiet moment, Ethan made a promise to himself. As well, guilt would not be the end of his story. Responsibility would be the beginning. The truth didn't arrive all at once. It came in pieces, each one sharper than the last. While Nia slept under careful watch, Ethan stood in a small consultation room with a detective, the air heavy with things that could never be unheard. A tablet slid across the table. Search histories, dates, times, questions no loving parent would ever ask. How to make a child's death look natural. Can dehydration cause fatal collapse in children? Adjusting oxygen levels without detection. Ethan's hands went numb as he scrolled. This hadn't been a moment of rage. It was planning. Weeks, maybe months of quiet intent hiding behind rehearsed smiles and charity speeches. Clarissa hadn't snapped. She had calculated. Then came the financial records. Failed investments, mounting debt, lies stacked on top of lies. And finally, the last blow, attempted applications for life insurance policies, all listing herself as beneficiary. On Nia, his daughter. Ethan pushed the tablet away, his stomach turning. "She was never trying to protect me," he said hollowly. "She was protecting herself." The detective nodded grimly. "We believe your wife saw your daughter as both a problem and an opportunity." Ethan closed his eyes. Every expensive gift Clarissa had given Nia. Every fake display of affection. It all made sense now. Love had never been part of it. Control had. Greed had. And when those weren't enough, she'd been willing to erase a child to secure her future. Later that night, Ethan returned to Nia's room. She was awake, watching the shadows on the wall, too quiet for a child her age. He sat beside her, brushing a curl from her forehead. "They found proof," he said gently. "You were right. About everything." Nia didn't look surprised. Just tired. "I thought no one would believe me." "I do," Ethan said firmly, "and so will the world." As he held her hand, something hardened inside him. Not hatred, but resolve. This wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about ensuring that every whispered truth, every bruise hidden under sleeves, every child too afraid to speak would finally be heard. Clarissa had tried to bury the truth. Ethan would bring it into the light no matter the cost. The days that followed blurred into a relentless march of paperwork courtrooms and whispered conversations behind closed doors. Ethan signed the divorce filings with a steady hand, even as his heart felt anything but steady. A restraining order followed cold legal language standing in place of the vows he once believed in. Clarissa was no longer allowed near Nia, no longer allowed to speak her name. And still, the fight wasn't over. When Child Protective Services stepped in, the ground seemed to shift beneath Ethan's feet. He understood why they had to ask the hard questions, but every knock at the door felt like another test he couldn't afford to fail. Had he worked too much, trusted too easily, missed too many signs? He answered everything honestly, even when the truth hurt. Especially then. Through it all, Nia stayed close, her small hand often slipping into his as if to remind herself he was real, that he wasn't leaving. When interviews grew overwhelming, Ethan sat beside her, never speaking for her, just anchoring her presence. "You're safe," he whispered whenever her voice faltered. "I'm right here." The judge's chambers were quiet when the temporary ruling came down. Nia would remain with Ethan while the case moved forward. Relief hit him so hard his knees nearly gave out. He didn't celebrate. He just closed his eyes and breathed, thanking whatever force had given them this fragile mercy. That night, back in the hospital room, Ethan knelt beside Nia's bed. "There may be more hard days," he said softly. "People may question us, but I won't stop fighting. Not ever." Nia studied his face, searching for cracks. Finding none, she nodded. "I believe you." Ethan realized then that love wasn't proven in grand gestures or courtroom victories. It was proven in endurance, in showing up again and again when it would be easier to walk away. Whatever came next, hearing's headlines doubt he was ready. Because being her father wasn't just a role he claimed. It was a battle he chose. Ethan thought the worst was behind them. Clarissa was in custody, the restraining orders filed, the doors finally locked against the past. For the first time in weeks, Nia slept through the night. Her breathing was steady. Her grip on her teddy bear had loosened. Safety, fragile as it was, had begun to settle in. Then the messages started. The first came from an unknown number just after midnight. "You're making a mistake." Ethan deleted it without replying. The second followed minutes later. "She doesn't belong with you." His chest tightened. By morning, there were 7 more different numbers, same venom. Each one felt like a hand reaching through the dark, trying to pull Nia back into fear. He didn't tell her. Not at first. He smiled, made breakfast, pretended the world hadn't tilted again. But children sense cracks adults try to plaster over. When his phone buzzed for the 10th time that afternoon, Nia flinched. "Is it her?" she asked softly. "No," Ethan said too quickly. Then he knelt in front of her, choosing truth over comfort. "It's someone who thinks hurting us will change things. It won't. The police traced the messages. Surveillance footage followed. And the truth surfaced like a sickness finally named Clarissa's sister, Valerie, had taken up the fight. Photos of Nia at school, at the park, outside their home. Proof she'd been watched, followed, hunted by someone who believed blood loyalty mattered more than a child's life. When officers took Valerie into custody, Nia didn't cheer. She just sat beside Ethan on the couch, knees tucked to her chest, staring at the wall. "I thought it was over," she whispered. Ethan pulled her close. "So did I. But listen to me, this isn't about power anymore. It's about protection. And I'm not doing this alone." He meant it. Detectives, lawyers, guards at the door. Light poured into places fear once lived. Valerie's threats couldn't undo what had changed, because for the first time, Nia wasn't silent, and Ethan wasn't backing down. The danger had tried to follow them, but it didn't get to decide how their story ended. The courtroom was silent when the verdict was read, the kind of silence that presses against your chest and forces you to breathe carefully. Ethan felt Nia's small hand tighten around his, her fingers trembling, but firm, as if she were anchoring herself to the moment. Across the room, Clarissa stood in a plain uniform, stripped of elegance, stripped of control. Yet even now, there was a hardness in her eyes, a refusal to fully accept what she had done. The charges echoed through the room like heavy stones, attempted murder, child endangerment assault. Each word carried the weight of nights Nia had cried quietly into her pillow, of breath she had almost lost in that hospital bed. When the judge spoke of premeditation and cruelty, Ethan felt something inside him finally loosen. Not satisfaction. Release. Clarissa's sentence, 20 years, fell like a final door closing. A future she had planned so carefully collapsed in a single moment. Gasps rippled through the gallery, but Ethan barely heard them. He was watching Nia. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She simply leaned into his side, her head resting against his arm, as if to say she was done being afraid. As Clarissa was led away, she turned, once her lips moving in what might have been an apology or another lie. Nia looked away. That choice alone felt like victory. Outside sunlight spilled across the courthouse steps, warm and blinding after so long in the dark. Reporters called Ethan's name questions sharp and endless, but he ignored them all. He opened the car door for Nia and buckled her in himself, his hands gentle, deliberate. "Is it really over?" she asked quietly. Ethan met her eyes. "Yes," he said. "The part where she can hurt you is over." Nia nodded, exhaustion finally washing over her. As they drove away, Ethan felt it then, not triumph, not revenge, but something far more powerful. Justice hadn't erased the past, but it had given them back their future. The healing didn't come all at once. It arrived quietly in ordinary moments that slowly stitched their lives back together. Ethan and Nia left the city behind, moving into a smaller home with creaking floors, a backyard that caught the afternoon sun, and walls that held no echoes of fear. It wasn't grand. It was safe. And for the first time, that was enough. Nia chose her room carefully, the one closest to Ethan's. She painted the walls a soft lavender and placed her old teddy bear in the center of the bed like a guardian. On the first night there, she stood in the doorway and whispered, almost afraid to Hope, "This is really mine." Ethan knelt beside her. "It's ours," he said, "and no one can take it from us." Ethan changed too. He worked less. He listened more. Mornings were for pancakes that came out uneven, and afternoons for walks to the park, where Nia learned how to laugh without checking over her shoulder. At night, when nightmares still came, Ethan didn't hesitate. He sat on the edge of her bed, steady and present, until her breathing slowed again. Therapy helped. Art helped. Some days were harder than others, but the silence that once filled the house was gone. In its place were questions, small confessions, and trust rebuilt one honest answer at a time. Nia began drawing again, trees with golden stars tangled in their branches, roots deep and unbreakable. Ethan hung her first finished painting in the hallway, where they'd both see it every day. "Do you think I'll ever stop being scared?" she asked him once. Ethan didn't rush the answer. "Maybe not completely," he said gently. "But you won't be alone with it anymore." That was the truth of their new life. Healing wasn't forgetting. It was choosing each other again and again in the aftermath. And as Nia's laughter slowly filled the house, Ethan understood something simple and powerful. They hadn't just survived. They were finally living. The quiet moments became the loudest proof of truth. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in gold and soft pink, Ethan sat on the back steps, with Nia leaning against his shoulder. Fireflies blinked on and off in the garden like tiny promises. She watched them for a long time before speaking. "Daddy," she said, her voice steady now, no longer afraid of its own sound. "I'm not scared anymore." Ethan felt his chest tighten, not with pain, but with gratitude. He realized then that love wasn't about perfection or never making mistakes. It was about showing up when it mattered most, even after you failed. Especially after. He had learned that silence can hurt more than anger, that children often protect adults at the cost of themselves, and that listening, truly listening, can be the difference between loss and salvation. Nia smiled, resting her head against him. "Family isn't who hurts you," she said softly. "It's who stays." Ethan kissed the top of her head, knowing that everything they had endured led to this moment not erased, but transformed. Because family isn't defined by blood wealth or appearances. Family is defined by courage, by protection, by the daily choice to love someone even when it's hard. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is believe a child, listen without judgment, and act without delay. Love isn't proven by words spoken in public, but by protection given in private. If this story taught us anything, it's this: being present can save a life. Now, we want to hear from you. What does family mean to you? Have you ever felt truly protected by someone, or been that person for someone else? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this story moved you, subscribe, and stay with us, because stories like this remind us why love, courage, and truth still matter.